Josh, is severe weather. Welcome and happy Labor Day weekend to those who observe. We are going to talk tropics here and a strong signal for a storm to form in the Caribbean that we definitely need to be watching here as we head later into next week. So I'm going to talk about that as well as the rest of the tropics. So thank you for joining me this morning. What we are looking at is an increased signal for a storm to form next week. Now, it may take a few more days to really develop into anything. It may not even happen until it gets closer to Jamaica, but because of recent trends, we are looking at the increasing risk of this potential system to get to a hurricane as it moves into the Gulf of Mexico or even near the Yucatan and northwestern Caribbean. Now, obviously, a long time between now and when this could happen. We're talking about 10 to 12 days out in the future. So a lot of this could change, but I did want to at least try to take a stab at where I think the pattern sets up for a potential hurricane, and that's looking at the upper level pattern and kind of guessing at where things are going to go. That's looking at where waters are warmest, and it's looking at recurring cycles. So at this time, just something to start taking a look at, nothing to panic about or anything like that yet. We've got a lot of time and a lot can change, but this is the area that of greatest concerns where I think this ends up being. Now, as we look at the rest of the tropics, you can see the Atlantic starting to get a little bit busier here with 3 areas to watch. The Pacific remains busy, although we are seeing no immediate major threat to land. We do still have the remains of Shanshan, which was a typhoon that hit southwestern Japan a couple days ago, a new area to watch. And we still have Tropical Storm Hona, which is well southwest of Hawaii. In the Arabian Sea, we now have a cyclonic storm, Asna, which is moving away from Pakistan and will head towards Oman here as we get to the end of the weekend. So let's look at the Atlantic. I'll spend most of my time on that here. Now we've got 3 areas to watch. So remember, a few days ago, nothing was popping up. Now we're ending the month of August and likely to head into a much more active time in September as expected. This area near the northwestern Gulf Coast here needs to be watched for gradual development, but very likely it doesn't develop. It is just a big rainmaker for the immediate coastline of Texas and Louisiana, and eventually that moisture spreads north and eastward into Mississippi and Alabama. A lot of that coming here this upcoming week. So getting wet here around Labor Day on coastal Texas and southwestern Louisiana, but that area of moisture continues to expand. Florida is also going to be wet here this weekend, not from any kind of entity, but from moisture that's moving west. Now, the other 2 areas I think have a better chance of developing are this disturbance number 2, 50-50 chance as of this morning, but I think this chance is going to climb. It may take a few days. We may not see anything popping up until it moves past the islands and maybe even into the central Caribbean. We're going to be dealing with some of South America as well, which could hamper development. But once it clears the Dominican Republic, I do think the chances for this to form are pretty high. Beyond that, we do have another wave that is moving away from the Cape Verdes. Again, it's going to take some time for anything to pop up. The main development region is fairly reduced in how much it can perform here right now, which honestly is a little bit surprising to me based on what I saw a few months ago, but things do change, as you guys are aware. And this feature has a 10% chance of becoming something between now and next Friday. I do think towards the end of next week and over the weekend, we may have our next storm forming in the central Atlantic, but no immediate threat to land. Here's a look at the Atlantic basin as a whole. This is our weakness here over the northwestern Gulf, producing a lot of rain near Louisiana. I'll zoom in on that in a little bit. We also have a tropical wave and upper level feature here near the Bahamas, producing areas of heavy rain just east of Florida, and that is going to move gradually westward. We do have a front kind of draped across the Great Lakes and Northeast all the way down to Oklahoma, and also a boundary across the northern Atlantic. So our area of high pressure is staying pretty strong here. Stable, cooler air coming down from the Canary Current here. Also some cooler air south of this area. So we are seeing kind of a restriction on anything to really develop quickly out here. But that doesn't mean it won't eventually develop. Just right now, things are not looking great. As I clear this drawing and show you a little bit more, this is the area that we have to watch down the road. It is going to spread westward and west-northwestward into the central Caribbean. Things are hostile in here, so development very unlikely. Same goes for this next feature, which is a little bit higher up and more likely to come up around our high pressure area. Things actually get more favorable in here, but down here, we still need to put an X. And then finally, another wave will be moving off the African coast that, again, is probably going to struggle in this area. But as it maybe moves into this direction towards the 2nd to 3rd week of September, it may be worth watching. Again, I don't want to get too far ahead, but that is certainly on the radar, at least way off in the distance. Here's a look at what's going on in the Gulf of Mexico. Go satellite image from tropicaltidbits.com. Go check them out. I'm sure a lot of you do. And you can see there's no real surface circulation. There's a bit of a mid-level feature in here, spinning around the Houston and Galveston area. And so we do have some convergence coming up the coast and bringing heavy showers and storms to parts of coastal Louisiana, even all the way over in the Mississippi and southwest Alabama, dealing with some of this onset of moisture. But you can see, if you look at the cloud elements, there's a strong amount of wind shear circling around an upper level ridge here, and that wind shear does not favor any kind of development. Same can be said about this feature here east of Florida down into central Cuba. It's bringing a lot of rain and it's not moving much, but it is not likely to develop over the next few days. So as we look at the Gulf feature, the model most aggressive is the German icon, and it is not exactly that aggressive. It does show just an inverted trough here over the end of the weekend here, bringing some gusty winds to the coast, 20 to maybe 25 miles per hour, but not a big deal. You'll see it remains windy into Labor Day. Those beaches will be windy with a northeasterly flow that keeps this system out over the open waters. But the more flow we have out of the northeast here, and the more we have here out of the southeast, the more likely we may see some kind of a circulation form, in this case, east of Corpus Christi. This would be Labor Day afternoon. It's going to take a while to really develop into anything. It's not getting steered anywhere very quickly, but as always, as anything sits over the Gulf this time of the year, we definitely want to watch it because it doesn't really have an escape route. It's going to bring a lot of rain regardless of where it goes, but you can see there's somewhat of maybe a depression trying to form here by Wednesday night or next Thursday. This is not related to the one I'm concerned about. This is kind of a leading edge feature here that is more associated with kind of a lingering boundary that's been camped out on the Gulf Coast for a while. Here's what the icon is showing as far as potential rain, and this is the bigger concern, not the wind, but the rain. You can see numbers piling up, but mainly just off the coastline here. Now, Galveston is included in that. Bolivar Peninsula, Port Arthur, Cameron Parish, Louisiana, Calcasieu, maybe, all the way down to, say, the Atchafalaya Bay. We could see amounts in excess of 3 inches of rain through the Labor Day holiday weekend, maybe even higher amounts than that. We also have convergence to watch here with our wave that's moving through Florida. I know it's tough to read, but some of these numbers here showing 3 to 5 inches of rain. Broward County, Palm Beach County, you guys need to be watching for that potential for heavy rainfall. Over the longer term, if we average all the models together, you will see it's going to stay very wet for Louisiana and southeastern Texas. And eventually that moisture gets drawn later next week northward up into Mississippi, Alabama, and Tennessee. We may have some heavier amounts of rain in here as well. It's going to cut down on the heat, not the humidity necessarily, but even if nothing forms, which right now I don't think there's a great chance. I've been watching it for a couple weeks now, but we're going to see the rain. And as we all know here this time of the year, we don't need a name to have problems. All we need is a lot of rain in the same place, and that is something to be concerned with. We're also going to have to watch the southeast here along the Carolina coast and Georgia coast for some gradual development over the Gulf Stream. But again, nothing really showing us a chance of organization. If you look right now, it just looks very sloppy. Just nothing of great organization. A lot of northeasterly wind shear aloft here. A bit of a tut down in here. Tropospheric upper. What does tut stand for? Upper trough. That's it. Upper tropospheric trough. And what that does is brings a lot of wind shear and keeps this system from being able to grow. It just keeps it very disorganized. But lots of rain coming in here, and that is going to eventually drift north and west into Florida here through the weekend. So I'm not too worried about the Western Atlantic. We have our monsoon trough with our feature here, not yet showing any kind of sign of organization. Still small, still kind of disorganized, not much of a low-level center, but if I had to guess, there'd be something here near 50 west. And again, we're not going to really see too much happen here. It's just too much winds out of the east here down in the lower levels, and too much stable air and too much dry air to the north, providing just a hostile environment. This will probably hold together, but it's going to go through phases, and I don't think it's really got a chance to do much of anything as far as becoming a tropical depression until it gets past the islands here towards the middle of next week. So we've got a couple of days before we really have to be too stressed out about anything, and really a couple more days before certainty will start to grow on where this storm ends up developing, if it even does that. I mean, I've seen models just completely whiff at something like this. So I do think, if there is a feature in the Northwest Caribbean, which looks more and more likely, then later next week is when is the time to start making more forecasts. But for now, we're just going to watch. Farther out in the Atlantic, you can see things are loaded for bear here coming off of Africa. but they are coming up around 15 north into a more stable environment. The Canary Current is strong here. We have what's called an Atlantic La Nina, where the below average waters are starting to spread in here, which means the Atlantic is going to start cooling over time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take a few years, but the marine heat wave on the Atlantic side should gradually start to dissipate over time. And you can see here, if we go back into some time here, and we look at how warm the Eastern Atlantic was back in February, just as we move to the springtime and then into the summer, you can see kind of this cooling down here, these greens, and indicating water temperatures that are a few degrees below the average. As we move on into July and August, our models kind of thought this was going to go away or just not become a factor, but we've got this cooling here and this cooling here. And honestly, we all came out aggressive, and it's not to say we're not going to have some bad storms this season. I think we will, but maybe not as many storms because this area in here is going to see less action than you would typically see in a hyperactive season. It may be about average by the time things are said and done. But having said that, as features move into this region in here, which a lot of them look like they're going to continue to do, there's a lot of storm fuel here in place for things to quickly intensify. And that's why I make videos like this, because if there's a signal, we get to a point where storms are going to blow up very quickly and leave people with a lot less time to prepare than what you might be accustomed to. And that is a concern that I've got here. So let's take a look at the dust in the Atlantic. And you can see it is going to thin out as we get into September. And this is obviously going to be more favorable for the Caribbean and Gulf, still a bit unfavorable off the African coast. And then as we look at our ensembles here, these are models that are being run multiple times with slightly different solutions or potential tracks. And you can see here, the potential for a storm is growing significantly later next week in the Northwest Caribbean, also over the Central Atlantic. And then we have this potential feature moving into the Gulf here around the 9th and 10th of September, Monday into Tuesday after Labor Day. Here's a look at our European ensemble. Again, there's going to be multiple solutions, but I watched trends and we're seeing fewer of them pulling the system through Puerto Rico and Hispaniola and towards the Bahamas, more that are more directed towards the Yucatan, Jamaica, Cuba, and maybe Belize. But I will say this, a lot of them are now beginning to see the weakness to the north and allow the system to curve. Where that happens is extremely uncertain, anywhere from near Florida all the way over perhaps to central and eastern Mexico. But a lot of solutions here that bring this feature into the central or eastern Gulf of Mexico. And it's kind of hard to argue with that trend that's continued. The only thing that I would argue is that the storm hasn't formed yet, so we still don't quite know. Here's the GFS ensemble, a lot more uncertainty than with the European, not surprisingly. I don't think it strengthens this quickly near Puerto Rico and goes east of Florida. I think more than likely, as we look towards the 8th and 9th of September, we see something entering the Gulf of Mexico. Now, does it go more over the Yucatan into the Southwest Gulf, which Beryl was supposed to do and didn't? It actually came up this way. Or does it make the turn over the Yucatan Channel, which would be a very bad potential storm as it moves into the Gulf, maybe a stronger hurricane if that happens. As we look at the European control here, we look at the upper level features, and what we see here is high pressure building over Florida off the southeast coast. That's this area right here. We have a surface high up in here, lowering pressures down in here. That would mean the system would try to go south of the high pressure ridge. Now, as we move this along in time, we see that this high pressure area starts to weaken, and we see a trough moving down into parts of Ontario, into the plains here. What's going to happen is that's going to produce a break in the ridge that's here and just off my map here in Mexico. And the stronger that ridge is, or the more westerly the system's going to go, but the stronger this trough and weakness ends up being, the more we start to see something turning. I don't think it turns east of Florida. I think near or west of Florida is more likely, but there's a chance it may take longer for this trough to drop down, and that brings us something into the Western Gulf rather than the Central and Eastern Gulf. Again, a lot of time between now and then, but you can see as the system moves into this general direction, conditions look pretty favorable for development. This is next Sunday, the 8th, and the control takes it up into the Big Bend, which has been a hot spot lately. I don't know if it's going to go exactly there, but you can see that's one possible solution. The feature behind it here doesn't look like it's got a lot of longevity with it, but we'll keep an eye on it. And then the wave behind it probably going to go into more stable weather and unlikely to develop. So what I do want to show you guys is kind of a comparison of models here. This is the climate forecast system. Kind of ignore that. This is the AI forecast. But here's the European, and this would be next Tuesday night. And you can see here, not really much of a system yet. It's kind of moving into this direction here, just still kind of a trough, moving past Hispaniola and also being affected by South America. So at this point, we may not even have a named system yet. This would be next Tuesday, but the Canadian says something tries to form, and it's a low-end tropical storm. The GFS, not quite there. It's got the northern side showing wind, but the southern side not showing the circulation. And again, the ICON model, the German model, does show a weaker system here, maybe a depression south of Puerto Rico. So that's where things may be as we get to Tuesday night. Moving off into Wednesday evening, you can see more likely some form of a system beginning to form here south and east of Jamaica. The Canadian's a little bit more aggressive. The GFS is not, at least it wasn't earlier, and the ICON's kind of in between. Here's a look at Thursday night, and as it moves nearer southwest of Jamaica, we start to move into an area where something could form, and maybe even a hurricane, depending on which model ends up getting this right, if they even do. This is the Canadian. The GFS isn't there yet. The ICON is weaker, and the European does have a feature beginning to form. So it may take until next Thursday before we see what could be Francine, according to what I'm seeing here. Now, it could also be Gordon if we get Francine up in here, but more than likely this is going to be Francine. As we move on further, this is next Friday afternoon and evening. Tropical storm. Canadian shows a stronger hurricane coming to the Yucatan. The GFS is just starting to get things going farther to the east near the Cayman Islands. And then the ICON model is also near the Cayman Islands, between the Caymans and Honduras. Here's a look at next Friday or Saturday morning. And we see most of our models bringing it towards the Yucatan, except the GFS, which is a little bit farther east, as well as the ICON here. And that's important as well. Faster it goes, the more likely it stays south. The slower it is, the more likely it starts to gain some latitude as that trough starts to move in. We'll keep this moving here, and we'll be on both sides of the Yucatan, according to our models here, this time next weekend. Just a lot of uncertainty at this point, as you might imagine. And then as we head towards Sunday night, heading into the following week, a lot of solutions now have a more substantial system moving into the Gulf, but not all of them showing it just yet. And then as we look beyond that into the 9th and 10th here, Monday evening, the European is obviously the one that's scariest. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but shows a hurricane in the Central Gulf. The Canadian shows it in the Western Gulf. The GFS blows it up very quickly in the Western Gulf. And other models show lowering pressures, but not necessarily anything of great concern. So what we're seeing here is the track of the heaviest rain likely goes right over Jamaica, maybe over Haiti, and certainly over the Central Islands. This is rainfall through next Friday. We also see it very wet here over the Western Gulf region and over South Florida, and eventually up the Carolina coast as well. Looking at winds from our different models here, the European doesn't really have anything going until this feature gets maybe up towards the Yucatan next Sunday. And then you can see it's developing it north of the Yucatan pretty quickly here, a hurricane in the Central Gulf next Monday into Tuesday. The European ensemble control shows the development, but it's more aggressive and turns us towards a Big Bend, has a nasty storm heading in that direction on the 9th or 10th, and then moving into the southeast after that. The GFS, as I mentioned before, was slower to get this feature to develop, but it does have something in the Western Gulf that needs to be watched. Again, everything's saying Gulf at this point. It's just a matter of where the curve happens, or if it goes south into Mexico or turns north and east. And I will say the barrel forecast had it going south to Mexico, but it ended up being totally wrong. So we may see some adjustments here with this. All right, so that is a look at the Atlantic. We have Hona here, tropical storm watch in effect for some of the atolls. Not really a big threat, but some heavy rain coming for the Cure, Midway, as well as Pearl and Hermes atolls here. This will probably gain some intensity and become a stronger tropical storm. And models a couple days ago showed it becoming a typhoon as it crossed the date line. That's not looking as likely, but we've had a few of those happen before. We had the remains of Gilma, which is weakening north of Honolulu. And that's about it here. Not much else over the Eastern Pacific. Things are starting to shift more towards the Atlantic here as our MJO continues to slide eastward. And in the Western Pacific, sorry about this, you can see we still have heavy rain from Shanshan over central Japan moving towards Tokyo. It's been raining pretty hard around Osaka. If you look at the satellite loop here, you can kind of see that. Here's the radar image from windy.com. Heavy rain moving into Tokyo, but winds have died down significantly, and we're just expecting a remnant low that's going to sit around, just a rainmaker at this point. And finally, we do have a storm, tropical storm Asna, 50-mile-per-hour winds moving away from Pakistan towards the Persian Gulf region here. It will probably weaken, but bring some heavy rain as it does so. Here's a look at the wind forecast. You can see it dies down as we get into Monday night and Tuesday, but the heaviest rain has already happened in Pakistan, some flooding near the coastal areas, but that should weaken as it hits higher wind shear. So we obviously have something to watch. We've got a lot of time. Things are probably going to change, but my goal today is just to make sure you're aware of it and watching the trends at this point, not making any kind of decisions until we see something form. And in my opinion, we've probably got a few more days before that even happens. So I appreciate your time today. As always, check back with me. I would love if you could become a subscriber and join this community so you can get those updates updated for you. And as always, I hope everybody's got a wonderful weekend planned. Everybody is safe, and I will be praying for the safety of everybody. I give all the glory and honor to God, who has given me this gift to be able to share with everybody here today and every day. And I talked about it in my last video, but as a Christian, I want to share the good news with everybody. I talked about the love that God has for us in the book of John, and I will continue that. John 3:17, for God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. So whosoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. This is the verdict. This is the part that excites me. Light has come into the world, but people love darkness instead of light because their deeds were evil. The great part about that is light has come into the world in the form of Jesus Christ. Even though we all continue to sin, God loves the sinner and not the sin. And there is a way for you to have eternal life with God and his son Jesus in heaven. All you have to do is accept him, knowing that God has already accepted you and loves you. And that is the good news, friends, that I wanted to share with you all today. If you do have any prayer requests, I am happy to pray for you. I will be in prayer over the weekend. And as always, I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. See you soon.